Middle Ages differed from the New Age in three ways. The days were 12 hours light and 12 hours dark. The universe was also divided into two parts, light and dark, respectively, and each half had its own ruler, with God ruling over the light and Satan over the dark. In 1632, in the town of Luden, rumors spread that the nuns of the convent had become possessed by the servants of the Dark King. We are talking about one of the darkest mysteries of 10th century France. Let's continue with the fact that a recent plague epidemic reduced Louden's population by 25%. This small town is located in western France, and today its population is less than 7,000 people. 400 years ago, it was a major agglomeration, 2 to 3 times larger than it is now, and it served as a fortress for the Protestants after the start of the Reformation. Unfortunately, the sieges and massacres that occurred during the religious wars badly damaged the town. In addition, to avoid divine punishment, the inhabitants repented and turned to the heavens, praying fervently and even sewing rosaries. They were ready to do anything, and then lo and behold, the plague stopped. The devil and the witches were blamed for the plague because people could not find the real cause of the disease and tried to accuse anyone, even the devil himself. There was always a scapegoat. Let's go back to the story of the nuns. One of them, let's call her Jean, could not sleep one night in September 1632. It seemed to her that someone was watching her from the dark corner of her cell. This is a familiar feeling, especially in childhood. But in the Middle Ages, such sensations were amplified 100-fold. We must always take into account the psychology of the people of that time when studying sources from that era. So our unfortunate Jeanne woke up 2 other nuns, and all 3 of them looked in the direction that Jeanne was indicating. It seemed that there was something there, some figure hiding in the shadows. The sisters began to pray, but the mysterious presence did not disappear. On the contrary, it began to fill the entire space, becoming bigger and bigger. However, suddenly it vanished. Later, the sisters claimed that it was the ghost of a deceased parish priest. But what was it really? Was it a premonition, a nocturnal vision, or something demonic? No one knew the answer, and this uncertainty was frightening. 2 days after the sisters saw the shadow, they fell ill. That evening, they began to have severe convulsions, with no other symptoms such as fever or cough. Panic spread throughout the convent, and people, seeing a group of nuns behaving strangely, began to fear another epidemic. The madness gradually spread, and 15 days later, 17 nuns joined the first 3 in the infirmary, claiming that they had seen a black ball fly into the refectory, after which they began to have convulsions. During moments of lucidity, they spoke of demons, but they self-destructed, as if in a movie. Otherwise, the behavior of all the young women affected by this darkness was very similar. Some of them ran away from the infirmary, wandering naked on the roof, climbing trees, and shouting mad speeches about the devil and blasphemy. One witness even said that the sisters left the convent and chased after the peaceful citizens of Luden, screaming. It's no wonder that people believed the women were possessed. At first, exorcisms were performed only within the walls of the convent, but later, when possession began to affect the wider population, the rituals were performed in a more public location, the main town square. This spectacle began to attract people from all over the country and even from neighboring states, curious to see this bizarre and at the same time nauseating show. 3,000 spectators came to Luden, and hundreds of them were onlookers who came just to gawk. Most of the exorcism sessions involved verbal arguments with the presumed demon, but the clergy also performed detailed examinations of the victims' bodies, looking for signs of demonic possession. However, no evidence of possession was found. After a month, it became clear that neither exorcism nor prayers could cure this strange illness, and the number of possessed people, as noticed by visitors from other parts of Europe, was only increasing. So what did the authorities do? They decided to find and punish those responsible, not only to scare the people, but also to demonstrate their power. They needed a scapegoat. In October, they found one. Sister Jeanne, the one who had first seen the devil, started talking. She accused a local priest, Urbain Grandier, of bringing the demonic plague to the convent. As if on command, the other sisters also began to accuse Grandier, saying that he had touched them inappropriately, and when they refused his advances, placed demons inside them. It was all very coordinated. Interestingly, several months earlier, Grandier had refused to become the spiritual director of the convent. Of course, he denied his involvement in the possessions, and it was not because he was a handsome man with a reputation as a womanizer that he was accused. No, it was because he had published a pamphlet criticizing Richelieu and defending the Protestants, who made up the majority of the town's 14,000 inhabitants. For that time, I remind you, this was a rather large center. The royal family disliked Grandier, and Cardinal Richelieu considered him his main enemy in the city. Additionally, Grandier opposed the destruction of the city walls, as Luden was also a fortress, which meant that the townspeople could defend themselves. In other words, trouble was brewing around Grandier, and he had no support to rely on. He was arrested and imprisoned. Was there a deal with Beelzebub? The trial lasted throughout 1633 and involved magistrates, diplomats, clergy, and many other interested parties. The most interesting piece of evidence was a document seized from Grandier's house, which was alleged to be a diabolical pact signed by the accused himself. It was written in Latin and was supposed to bear Grandier's signature, as well as those of several demons. This document served as the only material evidence against him, and such testimony seemed sufficiently convincing for the time. The church decided to subject the priest to interrogation, which in those days meant torture. However, despite many months of torture, Grandier did not confess to making a pact with Satan. He remained faithful to God. But it no longer mattered, as he was still found guilty of using magic, witchcraft, and dark forces. He was sentenced to death and burned at the stake in mid-August 1634, in front of 1,000 spectators. He died holding a cross, and the crowd even pleaded for his pardon, but to no avail. By the way, the square where the execution took place is now called Place de Grandier, in honor of the main character of this tragic story and victim of injustice. And what about the nuns? Another curious fact: a month after these events, the executioner who lit the fire went mad. The burning of Grandier in 1634 may seem like the end of the story, but the nuns' inexplicable possession continued for another 3 years, albeit on a smaller scale. It was only in 1637 that the sisters miraculously got rid of their demons, although how this happened is unknown. The abbess of the convent was credited with this achievement, and she became a celebrity, acquiring an aura of holiness. In this case, where religion, politics, psychology, and beliefs about the supernatural were so closely intertwined, it is difficult to separate truth from lies. Was the possession a manifestation of collective hysteria, similar to the dancing manias of the Middle Ages? Or was it all skillfully staged?